The emergence of agriculture began approximately 12,000 years ago, with the end of the Ice Age. This transformation was not a sudden discovery, but rather a long and gradual process of transition. The shift to agriculture is often simplified as a moment when humans planted seeds and everything suddenly improved. However, research shows that the process was far more complex. Before encountering agriculture, human societies lived under the extremely harsh climatic conditions of the Ice Age. During this period, communities were constantly on the move, following seasonal changes. Survival depended on gathering wild plants and hunting wild animals. From a modern perspective, this way of life may appear impoverished, yet the reality was quite different. Their diet was broad and balanced, consisting of gazelle, wild cattle, fish, various fruits, and wild plants. At this stage, hierarchy and social classes had not yet become institutionalized. Society was largely egalitarian. The absence of private property and of permanent structures such as fields, granaries, or temples made property crimes and organized warfare nearly impossible. There was a relatively balanced division of labor between women and men. Humanity continued to progress even in this period. Stone tools were produced and continuously refined. Fire was used not only for warmth, but also to clear vegetation and to manage hunting grounds. With the end of the Ice Age, temperatures rose and precipitation patterns became more stable. These conditions created a favorable environment for the expansion of wild plants. However, this period should not be interpreted as one of universal abundance. Around 10,800 to 9,600 BCE, a sudden cooling event, the Younger Dryas, severely reduced food resources. Groups that relied heavily on plant-based diets faced a critical choice: either continue constant movement in search of game or develop what is known as a delayed return strategy, food storage. This practice of storage marked the dawn of a historical turning point. Humans gradually shifted from merely following the opportunities offered by nature to developing the idea that nature itself could be controlled and managed. In the earliest stages of agriculture, people initially followed naturally occurring stands of wild plants. Collective and intentional cultivation did not yet exist. As the global climate stabilized, wild plants grew spontaneously, and humans simply harvested what nature produced. This cycle continued for approximately 4,000 years. Through chance discoveries and careful observation, our ancestors learned the life cycles of plants. Research suggests that early agricultural practices may have begun when people discarded the seeds of fruits and vegetables they consumed around their camps, and later noticed these seeds sprouting. The first conscious attempts at cultivation are thought to have occurred when seeds were carried to wetlands and tested there. At this point, a transition occurred from following nature to actively manipulating it. What began as a technical intervention gradually evolved into a genetic process. Instead of using seeds that naturally dispersed due to wind or environmental factors, humans selected seeds that remained attached to the stalks. Over time, this selection altered the genetic structure of plants, producing crops that were more resilient and better adapted to climatic conditions.
Why then did cereals such as wheat, barley, and maize come to occupy the center of civilization? There are several reasons. Cereals provide a high caloric yield per unit of weight and can be stored for long periods without spoiling after harvest. This made them a reliable form of insurance during harsh winters or periods of drought. Another key factor was portability. Cereals are lightweight and easy to transport over long distances. This characteristic explains why agricultural production and exchange expanded rapidly in regions such as Mesopotamia, known today as the Fertile Crescent. As for the question, why Mesopotamia? The warming and increasingly humid climate following the end of the Ice Age made this region exceptionally suitable for cultivation. However, agriculture was not limited to the Fertile Crescent.
Independent agricultural developments also emerged in the Yangtze and Huanghe river valleys in Asia, in Mesoamerica and the Andean region of the Americas, and in North Africa along the Nile Valley. Another major consequence of the agricultural revolution was the acceleration of institutionalization among newly sedentary communities. The earliest large agricultural settlements emerged within the Fertile Crescent, a broad arc extending from southeastern Anatolia through present-day Iraq and Syria to the Persian Gulf. Around 11,000 years ago, the first granaries appeared in the Jordan Valley. Because storable grains could be easily counted and seized, taxation became possible, laying the foundations of state formation. Perceptions of time also changed during this process. Linear time gradually gave way to cyclical calendars. Human life became structured around seasonal agricultural activities such as tilling the soil, sowing seeds, irrigation, and harvest. This system, working in the present for rewards months later, gave humans the ability to plan, organize, and think long-term. Another critical effect of the agricultural revolution was population growth. In mobile hunter-gatherer societies, caring for more than one infant at a time was extremely difficult due to constant movement. As a result, birth intervals were typically 2 to 3 years. With the transition to sedentary life, many of these limitations disappeared. People now had permanent shelters and more stable, controllable food supplies. This stability allowed for annual childbirth and led to the first significant population explosion in human history. For example, it is estimated that approximately 7,000 people lived in Çatalhöyük. In the settlement of Tel Abu Huraira, located in present-day Syria, the population is thought to have reached 10,000. These figures represent enormous population concentrations for their time. Population growth demonstrated that the critical threshold introduced by agriculture had become irreversible. Humanity could no longer return to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle because the wild resources of nature were no longer sufficient to sustain tens of thousands of people.
Population growth and the management of stored surplus made a complex administrative structure, the state, inevitable. This need for governance was essential to impose order on emerging chaos because annual agricultural production generated accumulated wealth. That wealth had to be protected, measured, and distributed through organized mechanisms. For this reason, writing began to be used to record, tax, and control stored goods. At the same time, systems of defense and military planning emerged to protect this accumulated wealth from rival groups, nomadic tribes, and competing settlements. One of the earliest command and control structures can be observed in the organized construction of irrigation canals and the coordinated management of water resources. Careful control of agricultural production gradually created surplus, what we call extra production. This surplus allowed certain individuals to detach themselves from direct food production and specialize in other activities. Over time, merchant classes, artisans, and ruling elites began to emerge. Archaeological excavations in the earliest agricultural regions clearly demonstrate that this division of labor also led to growing social inequality. Now we arrive at the central question: was agriculture truly progress? Traditional narratives present agriculture as a triumphant victory of human intelligence over nature. Yet archaeological evidence reveals that the other side of the story is far darker. When humanity transitioned to agriculture, health did not improve. On the contrary, it deteriorated. While hunter-gatherer ancestors consumed hundreds of different plant and animal species, agricultural societies reduced their diets to just a few staple grains, primarily wheat, maize, and rice. This nutritional uniformity manifested in skeletal remains as reduced stature and chronic vitamin deficiencies. Sedentary life and close contact with domesticated animals enabled the spread of zoonotic diseases, such as smallpox, influenza, and tuberculosis, from animals to humans. Hunter-gatherer groups, living in small and dispersed communities, did not allow these diseases to spread. In contrast,
Densely populated Neolithic villages became ideal breeding grounds for pathogens. Surprisingly, hunter-gatherer ancestors met their daily nutritional needs by working only 3 to 5 hours per day. The remainder of their time was spent socializing, resting, and engaging in cultural activities. Farming, however, introduced relentless physical labor under the sun, along with the constant anxiety of protecting accumulated property. Despite these heavy biological and individual costs, agriculture remains the indispensable foundation of the civilization we inhabit today. Because a single farmer could feed more people than just themselves, parts of society were freed from the fields to pursue other occupations. This made possible the emergence of artisans, writers, architects, and engineers. In summary, the agricultural revolution did not construct a palace of prosperity for humanity. Rather, it built a vast prison. Yet the walls of this prison also made possible the cities, technologies, and arts we admire today. We continue to live within this great, global experiment that began roughly 12,000 years ago, carrying both its benefits and its burdens. With this, we have reached the end of our video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.